Hello, my name is Ricardo Garza, and this presentation is on hip hop's impact on fashion. Fashion in America has always been prominent in magazines and pop culture, but to understand how fashion evolved into what it is today, we have to go back into the 1970s, where fashion changed forever. In the 70s, fashion consisted of bell bottoms, platform shoes, colorful tight fit clothing, and jumpsuits. Celebrities like Cher and Michael Jackson made these fashion trends popular. Before hip hop, the genre of music that had a huge influence on fashion was punk rock. The New York Dolls, the Ramones, and the Sex Pistols were big punk rock artists who made fashion trends like mohawks and leather outfits popular. So people in the 70s were wearing eccentric, brightly colored clothes with bell bottoms and platform shoes, or super slick leather outfits. The reason that this is important to know is because this is what people were wearing before hip hop. Now, the first rap song, Rapper's Delight, was released in 1979 by the Sugar Hill Gang. As you can see, they are not wearing any baggy clothes. They are wearing tight fitted black leather outfits, which was common in the late 70s. The 80s. Now, the 80s is when it really kicked off. This is when rappers first started having brand deals, such as Run DMC and Adidas, or Michael Jordan and Nike. The 80s was all about being fly and dope and cool. Everybody looked great. When it came to hip hop, there were three main themes. B-boy style, which is where we first started seeing baggy clothes in rappers like LL Cool J, Big Daddy Kane, and Slick Rick. There was sportswear fashion, where rappers would wear tracksuits and chains and rings. And there was Black Pride fashion, where rappers like De La Soul and A Tribe Called Quest wore afros and African colors to support the Black Pride movement. Rapper Roxanne Roxanne rocked flashy gold hoop earrings. In 1983, Gucci released an outfit by designer Dapper Dan, which was one of Gucci's first big sellers and is the start of Gucci in hip hop. Louis Vuitton and MCM also made their way into hip hop in the 80s, and jean jackets were very popular, and jean outfits were in style. So, fashion in hip hop was diverse, but among these different styles, there was one group that stood out from the rest, and that group is called NWA. NWA had a style that was new to hip hop and it was directly correlated to low income. And the 80s was amidst a crack epidemic, especially in poor neighborhoods. They did not have money for designer clothes, so one white t shirt and black jeans was enough for them. NWA started hip hop's biggest fashion trend, and so streetwear was born. Notice how their clothes are not baggy. The 80s is the birthplace of the biggest fashion trends in hip hop. LL Cool J wore the bucket hat, Flavor Flav had the huge chain, Run DMC wore tracksuits, NWA had street clothes, and we see large brands like Louis Vuitton enter the fashion game. The 90s. The 90s is when streetwear and gangster rap became mainstream, so name brands started selling baggy clothes. Although a lot of baggy clothes in low income communities were hand me downs, 90s hip hop was massively supported by streetwear brands like Carl Kani, Fat Farm, and Fubu. Most notably Pele Pele. Pele Pele is a brand that became well known in the 90s for their leather jackets. Brands like Tommy Hilfiger, Nautica, and Ralph Lauren's Polo Sport also rose to popularity in the 90s. The Wu-Tang Clan and Biggie blew up wearing street and sportswear outfits. There were a few hip hop trends that were not streetwear, like Queen Latifah's big bright patterns, Coogee sweaters, poofy jackets, and Clark Wallaby shoes were very popular in the 90s. This was at the height of gangster rap, where every rapper was out for blood. While most gangster rappers wore baggy clothes, Tupac was the exception. Instead of wearing baggy jeans and white t-shirts, he was into luxurious fashion, like Gucci and especially Versace. Gianni Versace was so stunned by Tupac, he once called him the most beautiful man in the world. Tupac walked and performed for Versace in Italy a few months before his untimely passing in 1996. He performed California Love at Versace fashion shows and the people cheered for him. This is perhaps one of the most important events in hip hop fashion history. Tupac managed to turn hip hop and fashion into one. He wasn't doing a brand deal with Versace, he was wearing their clothes because he knew what it represented: money. The 2000s. The 2000s are very reminiscent of gangster rap from artists like Biggie, NWA, and the Wu Tang Clan. Hip hop is also still mourning the loss of Tupac and Biggie, and to follow suit, rappers were wearing Versace and Armani in music videos. Jay-Z and Diddy started their own separate high-end clothing lines. Nelly launched Apple Bottoms. 50 Cent created G-Unit clothing line. Pharrell Williams co-created Billionaire Boys Club. Lupe Fiasco owned Trilly and Trilly. While new gangster rappers were still coming out like 50 Cent, rappers like Lil Wayne were making trap music. Lil Wayne and 50 Cent wore very baggy clothes and big chains and had a gangster look in the early 2000s. Among all the brands in streetwear, there was one key player that took it to the next level, and his name is Kanye West. Before he started making music, he was working at The Gap. Kanye's first introduction to the world was wearing a Ralph Lauren polo and carrying a Louis Vuitton backpack. Kanye has always had a style unique to himself. He wore colorful striped polos and well-fitted blue jeans and shutter shades in 2009. Kanye met Virgil Abloh and the two became close friends and often collaborated on shoes and merch. Kanye collaborated with Bape, Louis Vuitton, APC, and with Nike to create the Yeezy in 2009. Kanye started a clothing brand called Pastel, but when he interrupted Taylor Swift at the Grammys, the negative feedback caused him to cancel the line altogether. Kanye is now selling Yeezys with Adidas, and Virgil Abloh created Off-White. The 2010s. The 2010s was all about high fashion. This is when hypebeast became a thing. Hip hop is introduced to new acts like Odd Future, A$AP Rocky, and Kendrick Lamar. Many rappers started wearing simplistic shirts with a single image or phrase. While street elements from the 90s are visible, clothes are not baggy anymore. Shoes are more vibrant than ever in the 2010s. Most brands like Nike, Adidas, and Bape collabed with hip hop artists, and sneakers were all the hype. We also got one of the most surprising hip hop trends of all time: rappers wearing dresses. The main culprit behind this phenomenon was Young Thug, who fully wore a dress in his 2016 album cover for Jeffrey. Previously in hip hop, the only type of femininity we got from male rappers was when they would sing in a female tone, like Andre 3000 in Speaker Box. Now, rappers like Young Thug, Lil Uzi, Kid Cudi, and Lil B wear dresses. Rappers like Kanye, Pharrell Williams, and Andre 3000 paved the way for the rappers to have the freedom to wear whatever they want with their colorful, unique fashion style. In the late 2010s, female rappers run the game. Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, as well as Lil Nas X are huge rappers. Conclusion. Hip-hop and fashion have changed in many ways over the decades. We discussed the punk rock era from the 70s, the Dapper Dans and b-boy styles from the 80s, the baggy street clothes from the 90s, the shutter shades from the 2000s, and the dresses in the 2010s. We also talked about hip-hop's fashion's key players, Kanye West, Tupac, and designer name brands. It's because of brands like Versace, Gucci, and Nike that hip-hop and fashion go hand to hand. Rappers morph them into one with unique styles and attitudes. Thank you. This is the end of my presentation.